From the Land Grant University in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, this is the Closing Market Report. It is the 9th day of May, 2025. Happy birthday, well, to me. I'm 61 today. Thank you for listening to the Closing Market Report. Today we'll talk with Mike Zuzolo. He's at globalcomresearch.com out of Atchison, Kansas. And we'll hear from Eric Snodgrass at Nutrient Ag Solutions. If you can stay with us for the whole of the hour, we'll also take up Commodity Week with Risk Management Commodities, John Zanker and Bill Lapp of Advanced Economic Solutions. It's a great program for this Friday. You have a great afternoon and be safe out there in the fields today. And if you're traveling the back roads of Illinois, Indiana, and the rest of the Midwest, keep an eye out for those farmers in slow-moving vehicles.
Todd Gleason services are made available to WILL by University of Illinois Extension.
Mike Zuzolo is with globalcomresearch.com out of Atchison, Kansas. Always joins us on a Friday to talk about the marketplace. Hello, Mike. Thank you for being with us today. I want to take up a little broader context. Can we discuss this weekend's U.S.-China meeting about trade and how you think the market has been handling that to this point and the expectations maybe of some beginnings of a resolution there?
I'm glad you started the conversation there, Todd, because with the WASDE report next week, this week's trade with the beans gaining on the corn so substantially on what I think is probably the idea that the U.S. and China trade relations are thawing with their talking over the weekend, and also on Friday hearing that President Trump is thinking that maybe 80% tariffs on China is the right spot, but he's leaving it up to the Secretary of Treasury for the final number. Those things I think have helped unwind the long corn, short bean mindset to the point where November beans are back close to that 1040 level, 1035, 1040 level, pretty key resistance. And we've seen also a situation where the bean-corn ratio coming back to 2.34 is actually the best level in favor of the beans since November of last year. And this is very interesting to me, would be the word, I think, because this WASDE report with the USDA giving us fresh supply-demand numbers based upon current tariff levels could be quite a shock. And I don't think I'm the only one thinking that. I've got a 577 carryover for 25-26 beans, using a 50.3 yield and pulling 25% out of the tariff, out of the exports from 24-25 because of the tariffs. And that's not out of the range of estimates. In fact, I'm not above the highest range of estimates. The Reuters trade range, and I don't think a lot of people know this because it came across very strange. The lowest trade guess on the Reuters trade estimates, 267. The highest is 675. You know, you're talking about a 400 plus million bushel low to high number, but that didn't show up on the average trade guess when it was published. The average is 362 on the Reuters. So it's a very interesting close that we're having this week because we are seeing an improvement in sentiment. But by the same token, we could turn around next week and theoretically be hammered with a very large carryover number that, you know, could be 150 million above what is seen as the average trade guess right now.
Yeah, so many of those numbers, or a few of them, were where you are in that 377 to 410, 420, but that 675 was way out on the outlier side. A big number, but also a scary number that you have to recognize, and that's, I think, what you're trying to tell us, that you did to some extent and drop back the export of U.S. soybeans by 25%. So WASDE will be an interesting number to look at on Monday. Will the trade, will it react to it? I feel like half of me says it might and half of me says it may not. I don't know whether it can dismiss that kind of number or not. What do you suppose?
Yeah, this is where I think it goes back to the trade price action since midweek and this buy beans, sell corn change, and also take the wheat down even lower in Europe, pressuring the Chicago prices, which in turn pressure the corn prices as well. A familiar story, unfortunately. My sense right now, based upon some of our colleagues in AFB going to Washington, and also some of the colleagues that I have in Chicago and other trade areas, Asia news suggesting this as well, that we could get an Indian trade deal this weekend, and I think that would do a world of good in softening a blow by USDA in a great big fat ending stocks number for 25, 26 soybeans, because then all of a sudden you can say, look, China, it can be easily replaced by India when it comes to the demand, especially long-term demand. And I would say especially when it comes to energy, aviation fuel, biodiesel, and especially ethanol. So a big piece of the puzzle for ahead of next week's report to me, I'm not expecting any trade deal to be done between U.S. and China. I hope I'm wrong, but what I really would like is an Indian trade deal between the U.S. and India that the commodity markets see as a real change, a game changer in terms of solidifying that demand out there, not just for 25, 26, but for 26, 27. So that's kind of where I'm laying the groundwork with clients and subscribers. I can tell you a week and a half ago, I've been very plain spoken with my clients. I've tried to keep copy down because of the planting progress. I've just continued to hammer soybeans and cattle are where I really want to be in terms of hedges by the time we get to the first week of May. We're there. Cattle have made new highs. Feeders made new all-time highs Thursday. Tried to go after it again on Friday. And this bean rally, I think I'm going to take advantage of in that, putting a floor price underneath me, and then decide whether I need to pull hedges at the end of next week.
So I want to discuss some of this Indian trade possibilities. You pointed to energy side, so ethanol, aviation fuel, sustainable aviation fuel, maybe as well. India does raise vegetable oils, both in terms of canola or rapeseed and soybeans. Will there be a market for soybeans there, or is it that the market is for things that come out of the corn products?
Yeah, great question. Two answers on that. I was told 5 or 6 years ago by the head of my clearing firm that India is the new China in terms of a new commodity demand level, a new commodity super cycle potential. Many of us have been waiting for that. That's part number one. Part number two is we've got a leader in Modi now that wants to elevate the lower middle class into a burgeoning middle class, not unlike what China did after their WTO entry in 2001. This could be the ideal position and scenario and time for Modi to strike a deal with President Trump in the U.S. Unfortunately, the Pakistani Indian threats between each other in Kashmir could also add to the flavor of doing a big U.S. trade deal because of defense weaponry, and that's been talked about as well. And so I think we've got a situation on our hands where we could make lemonade out of lemons when it comes to the U.S.-China trade situation, because India comes on board. And it really does, I think, then put China in more of a defensive posture. The problem right now, and why I'm focusing so much on India, I should probably say, is because what I'm hearing in Asia right now is South Korea's got an election for president early June. They really don't want to strike a deal until after that election. And Japan has been going back and forth with the United States. It came out late this week that they wanted to take reciprocal tariffs down to zero. The U.S. said no, nothing doing, and we're still hung up on automobiles. And so it looks like early June is our best case scenario, or late May, or best case scenario for Japan at this point. So I think the trade's gotten to the point at the end of this week. UK is a great trade deal. We're starting, but they really want to see something out of Asia right here, right now.
Does it concern you all that the 10% baseline was included in the specifics of the potential trade deal that will be signed at some point in the future between the United States and the UK?
No, not so much. I don't know all the details yet, and I think they're still working those out, Todd, but I do think that the beef sector took the news very well. I think that was part of the reason why the live cattle market was able to go up another leg on Thursday and after that was announced. And I think the one missing key here is we just haven't seen the ethanol sector really take hold of any good news at this point. And I think that's probably one of the things that maybe is to your point, but I'm still thinking that what I've seen so far is net, we should get more ethanol into the UK as far as imports.
Yeah, it looks like maybe we could get a third or as much as half again what we've been producing and shipping to them based on the numbers that were announced out yesterday and my own calculations, and those very well could be wrong. Anything else that we need to talk about before I let you go for the day?
Yeah, I would say one of the things we left off the table this week in the trade is the weather. They're betting on the come with Ukraine, which is under a significant drought, and the Ag Ministry in Ukraine made note of that on Friday with their planning progress numbers. And we also are hearing now that China is buying Canadian and Australian wheat. They're buying potentially French and Ukrainian feed barley. They've got a substantial drought in the wheat plains of Henan province specifically, and kind of the epicenter. These things really matter a lot, but I'm thinking right now, because of the trade things you and I talked about, they're being overshadowed. But in 30 days from now, along with our own Western Corn Belt, which I just talked to a producer in northwestern Missouri right before we jumped on the air together, he's starting his pivots up. And so this is very early to be drawing down water right now in this part of the country. So I think weather's a big, big situation after we get past next week's trade talks and next week's USDA numbers, if we still have these hot spots.
Thank you very much, Mike. We'll talk with you again next week.
Thanks for having me, Todd. Have a great weekend.
You too. Mike Zuzolo is with GlobalCommResearch.com. He is in Atchison, Kansas. Let's check now the weather forecast with Eric Snodgrass on this Friday afternoon. Hi, Eric. Thank you very much. I hear you've been traveling out west. How are things going for you today?
Well, the trip out west was interesting because I left Illinois, which I knew I was leaving them in some drier conditions and warmer conditions, at least in the central and northern part of the state. We'll talk more about the southern part in a second. Then I flew over parts of Iowa, which they have enjoyed a much longer stretch of drier weather. And then you get over to Nebraska, and it's bad in terms of how dry it's been, but it was raining like mad up against the front range. So I was out there for 2 days of the trip I was out there. It was raining. And it was just funny because everybody kept coming up to me and goes like, this is not what it's supposed to be like right now. We usually don't, we don't have this. And I said, well, let me tell you what's going on. We have had a jet stream displacement issue for, I don't know, for about 2-3 weeks now. The jet is actually way, way, way up in Canada. But what it's doing is underneath it, we're just leaving these lingering cutoff lows. So even in the forecast coming up, but this has already happened in early May, we've had under that ridge really warm temperatures, really dry conditions. I mean, we've already had the Dakotas and eastern Montana well into the 90s. They're going to go back there Saturday and Sunday, while I've got Texas to Louisiana to the southeast struggling to get out of the 60s. Now, talk about a flip-flop, right, in the pattern. But that's what it's been. And so this pattern, like, for example, you and I were chatting before we jumped on air here with about Matt Bennett. So Matt Bennett's in Southern Illinois. That dude has called me every day, text me like, when are you going to shut this rain off? Like, I can't take another drop. And then I'll talk to a guy in Northern Illinois, like Henry County. I was chatting with a guy. And he's sitting there going, I don't even have pivots running. We've got such dry conditions. And in Northern Illinois last night, they got pretty chilly. We had clear skies, light winds, strong radiational cooling. Temperatures dipped down there in the low 30s. Wisconsin, lower Michigan hit a frost. I don't think it was damaging. They didn't spend long. It was just touched right before sunrise. And, by the end of the day today, the temperatures are going to be back up in the 70s in those areas. So, it's been a very interesting spring. And I just want to make a point about this. This has been a year where I would say the spring precipitation disparity has been very high. So Northern Illinois versus Southern Illinois, or think Nebraska versus Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma just finished its wettest on record 30-day stretch in parts of the Red River Valley. And I've got spots in Nebraska, like Kearney, Nebraska, right there in the center on I-80, that is currently having its third driest spring. And those data go back to 1893. So this is how the country's shaping up right now. And I feel like everyone's saying, hey, can we just even this out? Can you give me what you have extra and that'll help? And unfortunately, the atmosphere doesn't work that way. It's not very equitable.
No, it's not. So locally, I know Matt's called you. I know yesterday when we talked to him, he had 80 acres of corn to plant. And Matt generally is pushing fast and hard, usually one of the first ones done, because he's in the part of southern Illinois where you can run faster. So those guys are real behind. What does their weather forecast look like for the next week? The folks in Iowa and other parts going west, even the upper 2/3 of Illinois have been moving pretty quickly, and I don't think they're worried, but parts of southern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio really are.
Yeah, so the forecast is thankfully drier. Like it's not as crazy as it has been for those folks. And remember how cold and wet last weekend was. You're going to get the polar opposite of it this weekend. It's going to warm up, the clear skies. It's going to be beautiful. But it's interesting to say that because Matt's going to have another problem. And you know this, and everybody listening knows this. What happens after you have all that rain, and then all of a sudden you warm things up and dry it out? You've got a crust on that field that if your crop had been planted, it's got to punch through, or you've got to work it to get the new crop in. And so I'm concerned about what's going on in southern Illinois. And yeah, Matt goes, yes, but can I tell you this about Matt? He texted me this morning. And he goes, man, is all this drought talk still on? Because if you look out your back window and you're like, Eric, come on, dude. Like, it is so wet. We're way above average on precip. I haven't done anything. He's like, you kind of make it sound like there's risk of drought this summer. And where is it? And I'm like, well, first of all, Matt, it's not you. I'm not talking about Illinois problems. I'm talking about west of the Mississippi. And so what's amazing is amidst all of this, we still have a narrative going out there. And the rest of May is going to tell us how that narrative is going to go for drought risk in the Central Plains, Northern Plains, maybe Upper Midwest.
What does the second half of part of May look like across the country?
So there are signals that we are not done with our thunderstorms. So in 2023, starting today, in 2023 on May 9th, it stopped raining until June 28th in Champaign, right? None of that. That's not what's going on this year. Drier stretch now, but we do see storms returning. We see flow returning. It's not a dire situation without more moisture. But most long-range forecasts are looking at the Central Plains with massive question marks because one of our most reliable models, the ECMWF, is dry there. Some analogs are wet. And we're sitting here going, if this goes one way or the other, then I can finally answer Matt's question. If it goes drier in the Central Plains in May, we already know June, July, and August get hot there anyway. So if you don't have that May push, you have problems. If the models are wrong and the analogs pan out, then we just push the drought discussion deeper into July and August rather than front-loading, pollination with it. But there is still strong evidence, Todd, that we have got a drought problem. And I'm just going to give you an assignment if you don't mind, okay?
Okay.
I want you to do this. There are many places that you can access ocean temperatures. One of my favorite, first of all, my favorite's on my own website. You can go there and look at it at agweather.com, ag-wx.com, find it. Okay. If you don't like my site, go to Tropical Tidbits. And I want you to watch the Gulf of Alaska because right now off the Baja of California, it's cold. If the Gulf of Alaska in the next 40 days goes cold, then I will tell you that our drought risk for July and August goes up. If it doesn't, then we straddle this risk thing until something drops. But that would be the double whammy effect if we've already got cold water off the Baja and then we complement it with cold water in the Gulf of Alaska. That combination, historically, only one time have we ever had cold water in all those places and not had some sort of drought problem. And that was back in 1972. So there you go. That's the test that I want to. Well, that's the assignment. The test comes when we get to July.
Oh, well, by then I will have forgotten about the test, so you might have to remind me.
That's right. Hey, I used to do that all the time, Todd. 15 years as a professor. I know how to remind students of tests.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'll make sure I do it.
Thank you. I look forward to that. Is there anything new out of the National Weather Service or NOAA as it's related to the summertime?
Not yet. We're still waiting on their latest update, but they've been pretty clear that INSO neutral, so neither La Nina or El Nino will be the name of the game. They are the most aggressive agency on picking up on the fall return of La Nina versus going over to, maybe weak El Nino this winter. And I agree with them on that. I think that's pretty good. I will say this about NOAA. We had a very interesting problem with their flagship model this week. They're called the GFS, their flagship model. It went from an average skill score in the 92 to 93 percentile down to the low 70s, and we have no idea what happened. Of course, we question, all of the chaos around NOAA just as hey, is this what's going to happen? But it recovered. So we're still scratching our heads a bit on some of the stuff going there and going to continue to watch out for those folks carefully over the coming weeks and months.
Out of that, and I suspect you looked at this, did the Google AI models skill set, and I don't know whether they even have one, did that drop as well?
The European and the AI, okay, which is also European, they did drop, but they only dropped about 5 to 8%, whereas NOAA fell off almost 25%. But it's all recovered, Todd. So the last 2 days, we're back closer to good skill scores again. And so it's a head scratcher. We did hear, though, of another closing of a NOAA resource. The entire division of what's called UCAR has been furloughed. So we're going to lose the support of that over the coming weeks, which is very troublesome for me.
What does UCAR do?
So they are one of the biggest distributors of data. So there are numerous apps that have where you get radar data, right? So a lot of folks,
Sure.
they pull that from the UCAR data distribution system. Now, on their website, they said that system is online. It's going to continue to run. But when they're furloughed, should there be any problem with it, you do not have the engineers in place to go fix problems. That's the issue. So it's kind of like I don't know, I think back to when I was a kid, I used to, jump on the back of the cart and ride it. And then sometimes you accidentally let go and the cart just goes and you hope to God it doesn't hit another car. Well, they've had to jump off the back. And so it's going to keep going. The hope is that it just keeps going without causing any problems.
All right. Hey, thanks much. We'll talk with you again next week.
That's it. Sounds good, Todd. Thanks.
Eric Snodgrass is with Nutrient Ag Solutions, and Agrible joined us on this Friday edition of the Closing Market Report that came to you from Illinois Public Media. It is public radio for the farming world, online on demand at WILLAG.org. If you can stay with us for the whole of the hour today, you'll hear all of our Commodity Week program. If not, it's up online right now at willag.org.
Todd Gleason services are made available to WILL by University of Illinois Extension.
Welcome to Commodity Week. I am Todd Gleason. Our panelists for the day include Bill Lapp. He's with Advanced Economic Solutions out of Omaha, Nebraska, where he specializes in the food ingredient side or the end user side of the agricultural marketplace. We'll talk with him in just a few moments, but we'll start with John Zanker, who is with Risk Management Commodities out of Lafayette, Indiana. John Zanker now joins us. He's with Risk Management Commodities out of Lafayette, Indiana. Will be entering his 45th year in the business next week. Congratulations to you, John. Thanks for being with us today, too.
Well, it's nice to be here. Just to be here,
Well, just being here is always good. It really is.
And now that she threw the 45 years thing in, it's been a fun ride for the most part, and we'll see how this year turns out.
John Zanker is with Risk Management Commodities out of Lafayette, Indiana. He joined us on our Commodity Week program along with Bill Lapp with Advanced Economic Solutions out of Omaha, Nebraska. It's a great program. You can hear all of that up on the website right now at willag.org, and many of these radio stations will carry it over the weekend. Thank you for listening to Commodity Week and the Closing Market Report on this Friday afternoon. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.